Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Norway Chess 2022, this awesome tournament being held in Stavanger. Friendly reminder, in case you've been watching the last 6 rounds of recaps and you still don't know how this tournament works, the players sit down for a classical game, and if it ends in a draw, then they play an Armageddon. Winning in classical gets you 3, Armageddon is 1.5 and 1 point respectively. Now, in this round, we have a Norwegian on Norwegian matchup. As Arjan Tari, the Norwegian number 2, takes on Magnus Carlsen, the Norwegian number 1. He's only famous for being number 1 in Norway and for nothing else, really. So, they drew their first game during the day. They played a relatively boring and kind of not too much happened in their classical game. But this game was sensational. So, Tari begins with e4, and Magnus, with 7 minutes on the clock, plays b6. So, I would like to say something. Magnus would not play this against any of the other players in the field. I don't think he would. That's just my take. And I think a little bit of that goes into the fact that Magnus has a very good score against Tari. There is a clear level difference, right, in terms of just strictly elo. And I mean, Magnus is playing not just a provocative opening. I mean, it's going mega provocative. He's not even playing e6, which is normally what the third move is with bishop b7. He's playing d6. This is never played. Like, if I check, if I check like a chess base database of top games, I mean, Magnus has played this in maybe some blitz games before here and there, but yeah, the highest rated player to play this is Nicholas Theodorou, who basically plays this in like Title Tuesday. Like, no one at the top plays a setup like this. It's just considered not good, too many light scored weaknesses, not good enough fighting for the center. Magnus says, I don't care, I'm gonna play whatever the heck I want, right? So he plays it like this. Now Tari, remember, he gets 3 extra minutes at the beginning of the Armageddon, so he has a little bit of time to think, but he doesn't want to tank all that time in the opening. Here, computer's already saying to play absurd things like f5, and I think in general, the reason people stay away from this with with black is because white just gets a +1, +1.5 position, but Magnus is like, all right, so prove it. Okay, it's +1. I'm Magnus, all right? The fact that you're playing me negates the fact that it's +1. Now, we have c5 and c takes d4, so believe it or not, this position could have come out of a Sicilian defense. Like, the stupidest Sicilian's defense basically in the world. It could have happened like this, right? And now black, for some reason, plays e6, and then plays knight d7, and white plays f4, and bishop e2, and then castles. Like this, and then like knight f6, for example. Except I think the bishop is on d3 in the game. So instead of bishop e2, bishop d3. Yeah, so I mean, we have like a weird Sicilian structure now. And then Magnus plays d5. Not here, he plays d5 here. Really, the question is, what is Magnus going to do with this position? Tari goes to h1 to play g4, g5, and launch some attack. Magnus plays d5, which by all means forces the move e5. Magnus did not have to play d5. He could have like played rook c8, knight fd7, but he's 3 minutes down at the end of the day, and he decides to kind of force white to think a little bit. White locks the center, and if black gets passive here, white will just win the game. Like, white is just going to go for a big attack. In fact, I think there's already a Greek gift with queen h5, king g8, rook over. Game is just won by white. So black goes knight e4, and now Magnus begins kind of fighting. He's fighting around the pawn structure. He's got good kind of bind there in the center of the board with the horses. But Tari's just playing for a win. I mean, rook f3, rook f1. This is very well defended. I just cannot draw arrows. Takes rook f5, queen h6. I think the best move here was queen e7. I can understand why Magnus played here. There's a king here. Knight g3 is a threat, but I think queen e7 is what the engine preferred to try to go g6. The queen here actually becomes more of a liability for black than an asset. Because now rook h5 and knight f5. So we're threatening knight to e7 check. Very easily preventable. And now Arjan gets rid of this knight. And if Magnus had taken like this, I think he would have gotten rid of this knight as well and left Magnus with a bishop that it doesn't have x-ray vision. So it just stands there. We go knight d6. Something about that Magnus did not like, so he decided to take with the pawn. but still knight d6 happens, and now Magnus sacrifices his rook and picks up the knight, and this rook is dancing, right? This rook is kind of having some difficulties. It's got to get back, and it does. Rook f5. And now, if Magnus gets one more move to play f5, he's going to be completely fine. I mean, that connect 4 is really no joke. But now, Tari says, you know what? I don't really care if you're the world champ. I'm going to win this game. Let's go. Queen e3. a5 from Magnus, not allowing Tari to go forward on the queen side. We have king to g1, just kind of a pass back move, but just generally good to go toward the middle. Rook f2, maybe we're going to double on the f file, maybe we're going to double on the d file. There's f5 by Magnus. We have g3, preventing any future f4. Magnus plays king g7. Again, just basic improving moves. Knight b5. You don't let me play b4, but I'm coming in with my knight at this point. I can also trade your queen off if I want to, and maybe I have c3, b4. All right, rook e7. b3, fine, stabilizing the queen side. Knight to e6, Aryan comes into d6 now. All right, knight e6, knight d6. We might take, we might do something over here. Magnus plays bishop a6, and now we have c4 closing out this bishop. Knight c5, and Aryan Tari says, you really just gonna shuffle back and forth here, Magnus? Kaboom! Pawn takes f5, queen g5 check, and if the king goes to the f file, there is rook f5 picking up the queen. But if king h8, there is the same problem. And there's this, and this, and this has to stay guarding that. Queen g7, rook d8, and Aryan Tari, a knockout punch. Knight takes f5, take a bow. Aryan Tari, low-key, even though he's lost a good amount of the Armageddon matchups, is having the best tournament of his life. He's up like 15 to 20 classical points. He's 50% in the classical, with draws against everybody he's played, a loss to MVL, and a win over Wang Hao. So, highest rating I think he's ever been. Congratulations to him, and I hope he finishes strong. And the Norwegian goes down with a knockout punch in the Armageddon. But today we have 5 decisive games. So, speaking of MVL, who we just mentioned, defeating Tari, we have a Berlin. Now, yesterday, MVL likes the Berlin. He plays into these knight takes e4 positions. He likes the Berlin endgame, and that's probably what Wesley prepared, because more often than not, MVL plays d4 and he goes into a Berlin endgame. MVL yesterday played rook e1 against Topalov, and generally speaking, this is not something that leads to complicated positions. I mean, he beat Topalov yesterday in this position in the Armageddon, but again, 10 versus 7 is a very different story. Classical chess, I mean, generally bishop f6 gets played, and then rook e8, and the structure is so symmetrical that Black has really proven that they know how to equalize here. And that's probably what Wesley had looked at, but here Wesley doesn't play bishop f6, he plays knight back to e8 immediately. That move order allows white to do something. See, if bishop f6, rook e1 had been played, knight e8 right away doesn't get played here because there is no knight f6. You would play rook e8 or knight f5 and then get a structure with d5 and c6. So you would get something that looks kind of like this. But this move order allows MVL to play this move, which scores very decently and prevents Black from playing d5. But I think that Wesley just wanted a game. I think he might have wanted a Berlin, but he wanted to play chess. The pawn on d4 is kind of a target now for Black. This position has been reached before by the likes of Anish Giri and Hikaru Nakamura, two very, very, very decent players and also decent streamers. And that game went bishop e6, knight c3, and then Hikaru went back to d8. d5, bishop f5, Hikaru put his knight on d6 and managed to equalize in the, it was a rapid event, I believe, either Leuven or in Paris. And then this position that we get in this game with the queen on d7 and this had been played between Hare Krishna and Aranyan, so also in a rapid game. And the imbalance here is whether or not this pawn is good or not for white. And like, will white try to expand on the queen side using the very clear space advantage, or will white try to do something else? So white plays rook c1 and knight a4. We see immediately he's trying to kind of instigate on c5, and the knight does end up getting there. Now, here's something very strange happens. Wesley plays knight e4, and then just goes back. That very rarely is a good sign. So what I'm really curious about is why Wesley didn't prevent the move knight c5. I have no idea. I suppose there was something about rook c6 he didn't like because you're giving up the square. But okay, let's say you don't play b6. You don't have to just give a tempo to your opponent. I haven't like seen his interview or something. He would probably address what he thought was possible here. Like maybe, I mean, again, this is highly unlikely, but there is this, but this is terrible because these pawns are really bad. So maybe he just thought he was making an improvement to his position with this move f3, like maybe disconnecting. Again, I'm sure that the players have a better thing in mind than me sitting here going, I don't know why he played that move. The truth is I kind of don't, and I don't know how to explain it because after MVL kicks out his knight, he doesn't slow down. I mean, he continues to make improving moves. King h1 here, very nice move to step off this diagonal. H6, and now MVL just wins a pawn. Like, no questions asked. And by the way, computer doesn't even want white to win a pawn. Computer thinks that knight e4 here is even stronger, applying more pressure to the black position, just improving. Stockfish is a scumbag. But, you know, bishop d6, we win a pawn. And now a very nice idea here. We take the rook, give up our queen, but win the queen back. And this pawn is proving to be an asset. That is the difference maker. We have check, king h7, and now a very nice move by white, knight d6. The knight just gets to its square, hits the bishop, and white is up a pawn, and that pawn is 3 squares away from becoming a queen, or a rook, or a knight, or a bishop. Not a king, though. Chess is not that progressive yet. Or it can't stay a pawn. It like has to change its identity. So bishop d3, g6, and we have knight c4. The bishop is hit with the tempo, and the d pawn is going. Also, I'm going to win this pawn if I want. So that's exactly what happens. I take on b6. You can prevent me from pushing, but there's really no point because my pawn is going to make it all the way through at some point or another. By the way, very important here, knight e6 is not rushed because the opposite colored bishop endgame is not winning. You need to keep the knight versus the bishop because this is the bishop you need to get rid of. The light squared bishop doesn't need to be removed from the position, but that's exactly what happens. a4, and that's it. You cannot stop d7, d8. If you play king f8, I will just play d7 and I will win. And MVL making it look easy. All right? I mean, MVL has made it look easy in some of these classical games. He is up a good amount of rating points, back up to top 10 in the world. So is Anand, by the way, but we've talked about that. So nice win for MVL. In the Berlin, not really worried about, Berlin endgame. Another game that was decided in the classical portion was the game between Mamedyarov, who was having an outstanding event, I have to say, like 3rd, 4th place, and Giri, who is having, I don't actually know if Giri's having a good event or not. I don't think he's having an okay event. Giri goes for a King's Indian defense. So my guy shows up to play and then plays a sideline here. The main line here by black for many years was knight c6, d5, knight e7, and then, bayonet attack with b4, knight e8, or knight d7, or knight h5, and then f5, etc. But he takes on d4, which is just not, it's just not that common. Like, it's just not very, like, it's fine. It's fine for black to play like this, and then play rook e8 and attack the pawn in the middle, and all of this has been played before. It's just not as popular. It's not very much in style of the King's Indian, right? Takes, and all of this has been played before. White basically plays against an isolated pawn. Black has tons of open lines. I think they had been following a game between Duda and a Russian grandmaster. It might have been Matlakov. I don't remember. I briefly scanned the game, but it was in December 2021, so it was the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, and they're following this game all the way to this point, when here I think the other game proceeded rook e5, which actually I think is the best move. Queen a5 is also a move to move the queen out of the pin, but clearly the players had not seen that game or forgotten about that game. Rook e5 here has been played before attacking the bishop. By the way, I don't know this off the top of my head. I just hope you understand, when I'm citing these games, I'm not trying to sit here and pretend like I know more than these guys. Some people get the wrong impression. Like, some people think that when I analyze the games, I'm trying to say I would have done better, which is idiotic. I'm just telling you, like, it's just funny how chess works, right? The breaks are on move 17 and 18. So again, White's game plan here is to play against this pawn. Like, if White wins this pawn, White's going to win the endgame. All right, if White wins that pawn and gets the advantageous kind of queenside thing, he's going to win the endgame, so he takes the pawn. And now all the tactics begin working for him, because if queen takes queen, there is some knight f6 stuff, right? So that's exactly what happens. Now, Giri plays rook e2. Giri here If he takes on b2, this works, but this does not. Now he has 2 hanging pieces. So sometimes when you go for danger levels with a move like bishop b2, your levels get dangered and now you have a problem. Somebody outside is reaching for stuff in their car. Rook b1. I don't know why you had to know that, but rook e2 is played instead, and Mamedyarov gets this endgame. Okay, and the point is that now he is going to try to win this endgame. He is going to try to play this pawn here, and it's good that his bishops are on the opposite color. Sorry, same color. If black had a dark squared bishop, this is you draw here. You don't even play the rest of the game, because you opposite color bishops all endgames are draws, but not in the same color bishop endgame. So let's see how he does this. First of all, there is a saying: if you want to win a 4 rook endgame, like 4 total, not white has 4 rooks, then you need to trade one of the rooks. One of the rooks. If you want to trade all the rooks, it's okay sometimes, but you have to be 100% sure you're going to win this, okay? And the defending side, in this case, is losing, but sometimes no. So you got to be 100% sure. You got to trade at least one of the rooks, and he does. And Shakhriyar is well aware that this endgame is losing completely. If you trade all the rooks, so black does not allow that. But black is aware that if you trade into a rook endgame up a pawn, this rook is much more active than the white rook, and this is a draw. So you have to know which pieces to trade. If you ask, how do I know that? Get better. That's the truth. It's something that takes a long time to cultivate. You see Mamedyarov slowly improving his position, right? Finding that nice coordination. In a perfect world, Mamedyarov gets his bishop to b5. Obviously, in this case, it would be taken. But something like this. This is the perfect configuration for white because everything is defended, right? How is white going to get that? By not getting it. White is going to try to move on that side of the board. Giri restricts it completely. Now, one thing Mamedyarov is doing here, by the way, you see this coordination? What did I just say? What did I just say? He gets the golden coordination. But Giri is also fighting time trouble. He doesn't have a lot of time. All right, he's trying to defend. Mamedyarov is constantly like, I'm going to go that way. Up. By the way, tactical victory here. He's threatening bishop f7 potentially and rook e7 check. Maybe, right? So now we have king d8. Bishop c6, and in some way, white could get a winning rook endgame if he successfully gets some sort of exchange. Okay, and this is what he's doing. Okay, rook c2, still looking like a draw. Okay, so Mamedyarov decides, you can take my c-pawn, I will get your h-pawn, and what I'm going to try to do is now I have this 3 on 2, and I can create an outside pass pawn. Depending on the structure, as long as you have mobility of both your side pawns, you can coordinate them and make a passer, okay? Could Giri have prevented this? Perhaps, but he must have for a very long time thought that this endgame was still a draw, because here, Mamedyarov can almost force this. Okay, he can almost force this bishop endgame and try to play it for a win, but okay, we have this transformation, and here we go. All right, h4. Now we have rook f8. All right, we have rook c8 check, rook d8, a little bit of dancing here. And you might ask, wait a second, what happened here? Why didn't he just play bishop b3? I don't know. Giri decides to sacrifice a rook. And I suppose the idea was a4? Or something? Like, now play a4 and get the pawn to a2. But Mamedyarov just goes like this, and yeah, I don't know what happened here. The rook gets back, or there, h5, and Giri just resigns. I don't know. I mean, I suppose Giri was under tremendous pressure for the majority of the game, but I don't really see what, like maybe he thought rook a7 or something. Rook a7 was winning the a5 pawn because of here there's rook a6 or something, but I mean, just bishop a4. I mean, again, maybe he thought this endgame was completely lost, but you still have to play chess. The a pawn can still go rook f6, can try to win this pawn. A4, you know, a3, like it's tough with no time, right? It's tough, but I don't know. He sacks the rook, and yeah, that's definitely not going to do the job, and big win for Mamedyarov, who has beaten a ton of people in classical. And a ton of people overall, really. Mamedyarov has a handful of wins in classical. So, He's also playing very well. He has gained some classical points in this tournament. And we have 2 games that were decided in Armageddon, and they were absolute murders. Like, police were called to the playing hall. Topalov versus Wang Hao was a Sveshnikov Sicilian, and not knight b5 or knight f5, but knight e2, a sideline played by Topalov. He doesn't go for the ultra main line, puts the knight on g3, and then plays knight a4. I mean, this is some exotic stuff. I think Topalov just really likes to ride horses. The bishop doesn't want to get taken, so it runs back to c7. Both sides castle, and now we have a6, and Wang Hao begins fighting back on the queen side. Okay? And on top of that, even though Topalov is actually the one pushing the issue here on the queen side a little bit with c4 and a4, just going full Wreck-It Ralph, we have Wang Hao coming in on the c-file, right? And I mean, he's got very good laser beams pointed this way. Takes. Okay, we can breathe. White is a pawn up. And black says, that all you got? d5. Uh-oh. Knight a4 going for the bishop. Wang Hao takes on e4. He's got his pawn back. And you say, why didn't Topalov just take? I think he didn't like something. Something's looking a little nefarious here. Vocab word. Rook a8, and now a beauty. Wang Hao detonates pure savagery here with the move. Rook takes a4. Now, to the untrained eye, that's simply the blunder of a rook. That just queen takes a4. It's anything but that, though. As we have knight to d5, knight takes e3, and now the bishops open up. The knight flying into the f3. Oh my goodness. While the queen is out here having a smoke, all right, we've been trying to get the queen to quit for a while. It's not working. The bishops are about to, and this bishop is getting activated as well via this knight sacrifice. We have bishop takes e3, king h1, the bishop takes a detour to eat a little snack over here on the side of the highway, but now we have pawn takes f3. And the craziest thing about pawn takes f3, the threat is f2, and it's almost mate. Like, I'm trying to give a pass back move. It's almost mate. It's the king cannot move. So pawn takes f3, we go after the bishop, and Wang Hao plays one final kiss of death, queen d2, and you can take my bishop, but I'm mating you. We have this, f2, take my bishop, I take the rook, and at the end of the day, I get my bishop right back. And oh my goodness, it's like literally don't blink. Wang Hao just used everything. Wang Hao used every piece that he has. Look at this. He used his center pawn, then he used his rook, he used his knight, he used his other knight, he used both of his bishops, and he used his queen. The only piece that had it easy in this game was the rook and the king, but the king is a bozo. I mean, the king's just lazy. Yeah, I mean, the queen ended up doing all the dirty work here, taking all the pieces. Amazing game. And Topalov resigns because if he waits even one more move, the rook is coming. So the queen can't do it all by herself. You understand? Like, the pawn's gonna go. So you have to go rook d8, you have to go rook d1. Amazing game from Wang Hao. And that takes me to our final game of the day between Vishy Anand and Timur Rajabov. This one also Armageddon, and a very provocative one with bishop g5 and this top trendy line with the pawn to g5. So black now has many game plans. Most of them revolve around pushing these pawns, maybe hiding the king on h8, knight back on h7, and trying to launch forward over here. Castles, rook e1, knight h7, and there we go. I mean, this is absurd that you can play like this, but the engine doesn't think it's bad at all. In fact, the engine thinks that if white doesn't play energetically and instead wastes a couple of moves, h4, bishop h2, king g7, f5, and actually it's black who's trying to play for a win. Like, I mean, it's even g4. You can even play like this. I mean, if you're really worried, I mean, knight, like, this is kind of insane how bad this can get. Anand knows that, so he plays d4. The best way to strike back from the side of the board is down the middle, queen f6, and now a very professional move by Anand, removing the knight. He needs this knight gone, so the pressure is off his center, and the defense is off of the black center. All right, h4, and Rajabov's just going for it. I mean, he does not care. You can take my knight. I'm counterattacking your knight. Hg4, bishop g4. Here's the problem. You are playing one of the best attacking players of all time. Vishy at his peak, you could argue his peak is still kind of around. Vishy was a calculating maniac. Okay, this position, you can inject straight into his veins, and I just hit myself in the face trying to make that point. This man his instinct is bulletproof, even at 50 years of age, okay? Bishop c6, bc6, and this man says, queen a4. Now, if you remember, last game, the queen went to a4 and the position died, all right? The position wilted like a flower when the queen left. But in Vishy's case, this is an issue. The integrity of the black position is under attack, and the knight is gone, which means it's threatening to take on e5 when the pawn capture. This move threatens this and this at some point. Not right away. You don't want to hang f2, but you get what I'm saying. Rajava plays h3. Now a nice move. Bishop g3, covering the squares in front of the king. Queen h6, and Vishy takes. Okay. Rook e3. You see the queen over here. Bishop d7 back. And now, kaboom. And your attack is Uno reversed right back at you. You have to take my knight. If you don't, I will take all of your pawns. So you take. Now the queen is hit, but it's worse than that, because Rook g3 is coming, and your king, my bishop, hits your king's getaway squares, and my rook threatens your queen and your king at the same time. Check here, and now a beautiful move by Vishy. The queen returns home. Black cannot defend against Rook g4. This, and then this. And Topalov, I keep calling him that, Rajabov, resigns after 25 moves. Vishy wins again. And with 2 rounds to go, Magnus Carlsen, 13.5. Vishy Anand, 13. And then it's 11.5 tie between Mamedyarov and MVL. Both guys having very solid events. But it's the current world champion and the former world champion who are up top at Norway Chess with 2 rounds to go. I hope you enjoyed today's recap. It was full of energy. I feel much better than I did yesterday. I actually got to work out today, worked out for 2 hours. You know, a little upper body action. Tomorrow I'm going to go back there, put on that belt, squat, deadlift. You know how it is. Or maybe you don't know how it is. But you should know how it is. Fitness is very important. And so is sleep. I'm working on that as well. Anyway, peace and love. Shout out to Julian. By the way, I ran into this guy. I was buying some shoes for my wife. And I ran into this guy traveling with his 2 brothers from Germany. I've almost never shouted people out that I've run into, but so this might be a first. You can clip this and show your family. So hope you have a good trip here in New York, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for another recap. Get out of here.